Şöyle. Please welcome.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me to the Gobi event and everyone who's worked hard to prepare it. Today I'm here to talk to you about exciting developments in communications and why at Turknet we think they're important and exciting for the future. And we're talking about gigabit connectivity for all. And what we're talking about in gigabit communications and gigabit connectivity for all is really about empowering society, empowering communities to fulfill the true revolutionary promise of the internet and of a distributed, empowering communication system. So I'd like to take a step back in time to kind of understand how did we get here and why is this such a shift, why is it such a revolution and such a change, and to see where we are now and where we're going towards. When we think about communications technology and in general communications and telecommunications industry, what we see is we see a lot of mass communications, an asymmetric one-way communications in which a small number of entities who have the means, the resources, the infrastructure are able to reach a mass set of people and to communicate in a one-way direction with these people. So we're talking about radio, we're talking about television, and we're talking about newspapers and print. So few people are able to produce, few people are able to afford the means needed to mass produce, to reach wide sets of people. And then there are consumers. So the real fundamental asymmetry in the relations between those who are communicating and those who are consuming the communications. And a lot of this was due to the technology at the time, the availability, the costs of this technology, and the economic arrangements that were made for their provisioning. Of course, one-to-one communications also existed, and telephone service allowed for individuals to communicate one-on-one with each other. But here again, there was no ability to reach a mass set of people, so it was very limited with who you could reach. And typically, when you look at the pricing, the economic arrangements around telephone, it was all however many minutes you speak, you have to pay that much money. So it was quite restrictive. If you want to talk a lot, if you want to call many people or reach a lot of people, again, it was costly. So realistically, for communities, communications for people was much more about receiving the communications than about actually being a part of them and being so involved with them. So really a lack of two-way and of empowerment. When we look at the creation of the internet, especially the World Wide Web and the commercial internet, it's very interesting to see how it's actually the coming together of two very distinct worlds, two very distinct approaches to development, to innovation, to technology. And it's actually this intersection and what's happening now that I think is exciting and also gives a lot of food for thought in understanding where we are now and where we may be going in the future. So the modern internet that we all use today actually came about from two very distinct sources of technology and innovation and innovators and companies. One of them is the classical telecommunications industry. And here we go back to PTT's post-telephone telegraph, national monolithic projects, typically government projects, typically monopoly projects, built to provide a communications infrastructure, a single infrastructure with long-term planning, 10-year plans, 5-year plans, less focus on technological innovation and more focus on spreading it out to the communities. A more bureaucratic community, state planning, and with very long time frames, and not necessarily a very commercial touch. Typically, when we look at telecommunication services coming from this, from these institutions, a lot of it, everything is metered. So how many minutes do you speak, how much data do you use, everything you pay for. And by collecting these fees, they're able to invest and build out the network. The other source of the commercial internet, innovative technology, what's allowed it to happen, is the personal computer industry. The personal computer industry actually, as many of you know, started really in the 70s in Silicon Valley with companies like Apple Computer, with Atari, and many other companies that basically took what was a very monolithic mainframe IBM type industry and turned it into a much more entrepreneurial, much more grassroots, and much more innovative industry. So the computer industry, starting with Apple, but many, Microsoft and so forth, are much smaller companies, more entrepreneurial, started with lesser resources, and really started with a hobbyist passion to spread their technology, to move very quickly, to try new things, and to be extremely innovative. So this industry is very different from telecommunications. They have to prove themselves in the market. They're much more closer to the communities who are using their solutions, and they're much more innovative, much more able to take quick decisions, risky decisions, courageous decisions. And so when you see the internet of today, you see these two worlds. So one is very long-term planning, infrastructures, decades-long investments, and on the other hand, you have this extremely creative, fast-moving, entrepreneurial community of people who are trying things much more quickly, taking huge risks, some of them working, some of them failing, and working at a breakneck speed, and really trying to impact communities and their customers on a much shorter time scale and in a much bigger way. So what we've experienced over these past years is, of course, in some sense, the magic of what happens when all these resources and these talented people and infrastructures come together. At the same time, we've experienced a tug of war between different mindsets and different approaches. The telecom view of the world is more controlling, believes more in a single solution that's caters to all needs, whereas the technology approach is much more of an ecosystem in which there are multiple players. There's not one player who does everything, and the ecosystem creates many more opportunities and gives much more room for engagement of users, power users, and the communities in dictating the future. So it's a more bottom-up, and the other one is a bit more top-down. We see this reflection in some of the pricing and commercial approaches that have happened. Typically, the technology community and the internet community, when you look at the World Wide Web, it believes in non-metered, use as much as you need, use as much as you can, basically all you can eat type of approach. This is different than the telecommunications community, where historically, if you speak for a minute, you pay for a minute. If you use 10 kilobytes, you pay more than if you use 5 kilobytes type of approach. This was very critical to the expansion and development of the World Wide Web that the technology community kind of won out here, because when you look at the telecommunications approach, you may have heard there was an alternative to the World Wide Web which was called Minitel. It was also available, came out of France, France Telecom, but also available for a short while in Turkey, in which it was a similar system where it was data you could look on screens, but every link that you clicked, every page that you viewed, you had to pay. So everything was pay, pay, pay. If you look at more information, you pay more money. If you look at less information, you pay less money. I think it's important to recognize that what really allowed the World Wide Web to take off and grow as fast as it can is that A, you don't pay for absolutely everything, which means that people were more incentivized to look at things. And B, that also gave an opportunity for many more content creators to get involved in it, to try things, and to have the freedom to reach people who wouldn't be afraid. I don't want to look at this new website I haven't heard of because maybe I'm going to be charged for it. So the whole interlinking created a much more powerful ecosystem. When you look at the tariffing, the pricing for communication services, as recently as a few years ago, you had things like quotas, fair usage quotas, fair usage levels, where, again, the telecommunications approach is, if you use more than a certain amount, you need to pay more, use only so much, limit the amount you're using. Really an approach that's focused on restricting what is perceived to be a scarce resource, which is the amount of kilobits that the network can carry. But the technological approach and the technology that drives the internet has brought us actually to a point where really the limiting factor in the internet is not the amount of data that can be carried. Increasingly with fiber optic cables, there is no real limit on how much, it keeps increasing. You can really put endless amounts of information, and the marginal cost, the incremental cost of sending another bit is really trivial, non-existent. So the whole mindset and approach is different. Now, as Turknet, we're a company that makes significant investments, fiber investments. So, we are part of the telecommunications community. But at the same time, we are a player who started with the internet. And our whole approach and our whole understanding with the technological developments, with the fiber and with the value system, the ecosystem of the internet, is that empowering the users, giving full capacity to all the users is what's in the interest of our company and also of the communities. And metering every bit that's used, trying to limit the capacities used and trying to put a pricing scheme that is basically disincentivizing use is not serving our customers and it's not serving the communities, because again, it's moving the communities to self-restrict their usage and not to fully use the internet. So when we get to the gigabit community, what's really exciting about it is that whereas the internet as it is now has in theory, has the promise of two-way communication, of empowerment, of ecosystem, the reality is that with 20/3 megabits, you can't really deliver on the promise. So in theory, anyone on the internet can publish, can be a YouTuber, can do all sorts of great things. This is what's wonderful about the internet. It's no longer you watch what someone else is putting on the TV. You yourself are part of this ecosystem. You can create your own services, your own videos, your own products. You can market them not only in your vicinity, but to anywhere in the world. You can reach out to people. But the reality is that with a limited capacity line, it's a theory, right? It sounds nice, but realistically, it's just not enough. But the amazing thing with the fiber technologies and the gigabit is that actually, when you lay a fiber line to a household, to a business, to a small business, to a technopark, actually that fiber can carry basically endless amounts of capacity. And it's here really, when you give each user the full gigabit usage, symmetric upload, download, that you're empowering and enabling the community to really live the internet to the fullest, to be a complete stakeholder, not to be purely a consumer, but also to take part, to participate, to create, to co-create, to collaborate, and to reach out to people everywhere in a much more engaged way. So, and this is why we're very excited at Turknet about this new future, about really providing this gigabit connectivity to all the households, to all the businesses, small businesses, to all the startups, to really allow all of them, the community, consumers, households, children, high school students, to fully take part in this life, to fully be able to create, to contribute to the community, to be completely connected with anywhere in the world, and to be not just be passive participants, but to be active actors in creating the future that we want. So we do think it is a technological increment from lower speeds to higher speeds, but we think it is also a true revolution in empowerment of society. When a huge number of people, it may not be 100%, but when a majority of households can connect it in a gigabit manner to the internet, the power they have to do things, the power for new creators to reach them, to come up with new business models, new content models, and to know that huge amounts of households will be able to consume them. Tools that will allow almost all the households to use those tools to create content, to contribute on the internet. The whole economic arrangement in society changes, and it's an extremely equalizing development. It means that the power relation between those that have the powers of mass communication, who have the resources, the monetary means, the funds, and the capital, and the people who don't, is much more limited. So now, just getting a household internet connection, you know, we at Turknet, we sell a gigabit for 140 liras per month, which is, I don't know, $8 or $9 a month. You have the full power, you have as much capacity as, you know, a huge corporation. It's not, you're no longer working in an asymmetric world. You have all these resources to reach out, to consume, and to produce. So this rearrangement of power in the society is very exciting as well, because it's really empowering the communities to do much more. Previously, without the resources, there wasn't much they could do. Now, increasingly, with access to these resources, to the communications technology, there's much more that they can do, and they're no less powerful than the groups that have huge monetary resources, at least in terms of communications. So I think this rearrangement in the community and in relations between sources of power, the traditional producers, and the communities is an ongoing huge shift. And we see it now already with influencers, with the new brands, with companies that are coming out of nowhere to become huge, successful companies, even though they started without all these huge capital financial resources, basically by tapping into these communications technologies. And you know, when we look at Turkey today, some of the highest value companies are companies that didn't exist more than 10 years ago, companies that are purely focused on reaching their consumers through these communications channels, and that were able to make these successful business models thanks to the existence of this infrastructure and to this equalizing technology that gave them an opportunity to break through where typically more established companies would always be a step ahead. So, you know, when you look at things like e-commerce, when you look at things like food delivery or grocery deliveries, it's not the old companies who are already doing offline groceries or food deliveries or logistics who have become the successful companies. It's brand new companies. companies that started from scratch, who were able to use these new technologies. This is a good thing for society, that there's an ability for new people to put their ideas, their creativity to use, and they can reach success, rather than the previous arrangement where basically the more capital, the more existing infrastructure and setup you had, the huge advantage you would have over any new player, because you just had so much more money, that you could outspend them, that you could reach out to consumers so much more easily through mass communications, through paid means. And this is a huge change, and it means it's a huge opportunity for all of us, for creators, for entrepreneurs, for change agents, that there's much more opportunity now to bring a new idea and to make it successful. I think Turknet is an interesting example of this as well. We're essentially started as a startup quite a while ago in '96, but essentially a technology startup without huge funding, without significant means, competing against what are essentially some of the most known and largest companies in Turkey, which are the big telecommunications companies. But without having huge monetary resources, advertising resources, simply by focusing on the technology and on the communities, reaching out to the communities and interacting with them in a more equal manner, involving them in the process rather than a top-down approach, and speaking down to the people, we've managed to get considerable success. Last year in Turkey, in the fixed line communications, in the household communications, telecommunications market, we were number 2 in gaining customers, fixed line customers. Only the biggest player in Turkey, gained more customers than us. We gained more customers than many other companies who are much larger than ourselves. And this is a testament to the power of working with communities, of engaging directly with users, of giving the users a say in the direction of the technology, and feeling and having a more equal relationship in which the community is involved in creating the future and tapping into that, rather than having a top-down approach in which one company decides everything and is telling the consumers what they should consume and what they should do. I think some final words I want to say about this change in economic relations and in the structure of power is that increasingly in many areas we are moving from an economic arrangement which is built around scarcity of resources and allocating the scarcity of these resources to one in which physical resources are not so much the scarcity as complexity and attention and ability to manage so much information is the problem. To make it more, state it more clearly, when you look at a lot of industries and a lot of economic arrangements, what are people busy doing, what are their employment, what you see is that a lot of industries are built around the fact that there's a scarcity, there's only a certain amount of material available, and this material has to be sold, so it makes sense to sell the material to those people who will pay the most for it, because the people who are willing to pay the most are the people who have shown that they care the most about it. If you take some scarce resource and you give it to everyone at the same cost, or you give it to anyone who takes it, then people who really desperately need it may not be able to get it, and people who don't really need it end up getting it for cheap, but they don't really care, maybe they don't use it. So in the existing economic arrangements, a lot of time, a lot of people, a lot of work, salespeople, pricing people, marketing people spend a lot of time trying to match, we have this much available material and there's people who want to buy it. How do we set up the sales processes, the pricing, so that it gets allocated to the people who want it the most? And this pushes, this is costly. A lot of people, a lot of salespeople take a lot of time trying to understand the needs that people have and getting the most extracting the most money out of a sale means that sales cycles are very long. A lot of people are working very hard on giving pricing, negotiating pricing, things like this. And this is a lot of friction, there's a lot of time, and it makes a lot of sense if you have real scarce resources. When you look at the new, some of the new areas, cyber areas, whether it's metaverse, whether it's things like gigabit technologies and technology industries, there are increasing areas in which the scarcity doesn't really exist as much. With bits, I mean, if you send 10 kilobits or 100 kilobits or 1,000 kilobits, really, it doesn't change the cost that much. And so spending a lot of time organizing, trying to extract the most money, coming up with tariffs that charge people more for more bits, increasingly is just adding restrictions and friction and inefficiencies to the market. What's actually a bigger problem for many people in these areas is dealing with the confusion. So many different offers, so many different companies, so many different pricing schemes. Their own life is complex. Solving their own problems means taking multiple technologies and putting them together to make a solution. This is difficult, and you need to integrate different solutions. And I think here, the real value add now for companies in this industry is to move away from this kind of scarcity-based pricing and work instead to really understand the customer's problems, find solutions to those problems, and really reduce the complexity, help people make decisions that are the right decisions, that simplify their lives, that solve their real problems, and reduce the complexity that all of us are experiencing. And at Turknet, this is something we're also extremely focused on. We have one offer. We try as much as possible to simplify, to not confuse the lives, and to really focus on solving the real problems rather than working on extracting value for scarcity, which increasingly doesn't exist. Now, all industries are not like this. Of course, we still have industries where there is scarcity. We have environmental issues. We have natural resources that need to be protected. So this is not true for everything. But in many areas, especially for value-add areas of the economy, increasingly the arrangements are moving away from managing scarce resources to a new future in which different resources are valuable. Things like trust, things like attention, time span, things like complexity and simplicity. And these are areas that we at Turknet are really excited about, doing huge, thinking about them a lot, bringing new solutions, trying to simplify the lives, trying to get rid of complexity in an industry that itself is very complex, removing this and really delivering high-speed, simple service so that our communities, our customers and the communities we serve can really take this and do the next step, build fantastic technologies, solve society's problems, and we really find ourselves to be a part of this solution rather than just one party telling people what to do. So we believe in the ecosystem, we believe in empowering the communities, whether it's technology companies, whether it's people, households. And this is why we're so excited about helping to create the gigabit community, gigabit for everyone, and being a part in this exciting transformation. Thank you.
Thank you for Mr. Chaliblar for your speech. And if you wish, we can move on to questions.
Welcome. I want to know what your thoughts on Starlink and if it's going to be beneficial to society or how much is it going to be beneficial? What are your thoughts on Starlink?
Starlink.
Yes.
So low and medium Earth orbit satellite constellations, which by putting many satellites in orbit allow almost any location on Earth to have a connection to the satellite and to access the internet is of course an amazing engineering and technological development and has huge beneficial impact especially for communities, areas, geographies that are underserved by fiber optic cables. So islands, rural communities, some vacation locations, mines, extremely rural areas. For dense urban areas, it's less clear that the Starlink will have as much of an impact, because when you look at the spectrum that's available, the bandwidth that they're realistically able to provide over a large number of users, it doesn't quite compete with the economics or with the capacities of fiber. So the economics of laying fiber to a dense urban neighborhood, to a city center, and the capacities that the fiber optic cable can carry is just an order of magnitude bigger than what you can serve over a satellite. And these satellites, however many users connect to it, they're sharing the spectrum. So the more users connect, the less there is for other people to use. So I think it's very exciting to have comprehensive coverage, to make sure that everyone in every community, whether it's rural, villages, or islands, has access to it. And I think it helps create the community where everyone has access, so it really empowers the entrepreneurs. But for city center economies and for city center geographies, I don't think it will have much impact.
Thank you.
So do we have any other questions? Okay.
Thank you for speech previously. According to speed test, I was read any place. Our country average speed test for downloading is 27.64, I think. And everyone knows uploading is lower. Actually, needless to say, we are aware of this. And what should we do? What should internet industry companies for this? I think. Do you have you any projects and?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, the question or the observation is that Turkey currently, on the rankings and the average household download speeds and upload speeds is quite low. I think in terms of ranking is lower than 100th, worse than 100th fastest country. And in terms of the average speed, according to speed test, it's 27 megabits. I think when you look at the national data, it's maybe even lower. But I think there's, that's for the society we want in the future, it's not high enough. And so that's why for all communications providers, but especially as Turknet, we're very active in building out much higher speeds, and with the existing infrastructure, providing higher speeds on the existing infrastructure. So we're offering already gigabits for a very affordable price, and we have built out our fiber infrastructure to over 500,000 households in Turkey, and we have a plan to reach 4 million households by 2024. I know that other companies are also investing, our competitors, in this fiber infrastructure. And on the existing infrastructure, we have a pricing strategy that is encouraging users to get the highest price. So even on the existing infrastructure, we provide the highest average speeds. And already on this on speed test, for example, Turknet is already way above this average of 27. I think we're above 44 megabits average nationwide. And when you look at speed test consistency score, which says to what % of your customers are you giving high speeds, we have the highest score above 75%, whereas the next player is maybe around 50%. So we are very much focused on increasing the speeds by any means, but at the end of the day, it means investment. it means building out fiber, and it means putting the fiber available to the communities. And so we're building the fiber, and we're offering it at prices that we think is affordable for people to take up and to use.
For all questions, and of course, again, Mr. Childers for speech. We're so happy to have you in our event. And now we invite Halavcı, co-chair of the Etki Investment Club Sponsorship Committee, to present his plaque to Mr. Çelebiler. Now we will have a 20-minute break and we'll continue with our last panel of the day. Thank you.